to do this lickety-split because I spent all day preparing us. When one retires, it is a rite of passage. And when you retire after 47 years of being in education, it's a serious rite of passage. This needed a formal ceremony. I spoke to the students recently at the high school, but unfortunately no videotape was made. I wanted to share with my family and friends that videotape. Since that was not possible, I wanted to say essentially the same things here tonight to have a record that I did exist and I get part of Yellow Springs schools. I also had some things I wanted to say to the board, like a farewell address such as Washington, which gave advice to the nation. So it is two-pronged. It is ironic that the years here are longer, my years here, than the administrators' lives that I'm presently working for. 47 years is a long time. After 44 years in Yellow Springs, I consider this my home. I shop here, I go to the movies, walk in the Glen, and visit with friends. Many people have sent me cards and comments, and I really appreciate this from the last 4.5 decades. Recently, graduates were writing me notes, and they said I filled them with knowledge, and they're yearning for more as they go on to school. I'm proud to know you, Joyce, and one especially significant one said you gave us information on SNCC and the Black Panthers that was very new to me, and you taught me to question the government, and this check on authority is democracy in action. Knowing myself, I wanted to share with the board some insight into me, because sometimes one forms opinions without listening to a person. This failure to listen is a problem. Board administration, they need to address this and really get to know us. One needs to know who people are and where one has been to know where one is going. Last night, the meeting illustrated some of the innovations discussed have been innovations many, many years ago. Segueing back to the students and the assembly, I pointed out that Mrs. Sarah Butler was my student. She's now Miss Lau in the 7th grade, as Mr. Gudgel was in the 6th grade. And I also taught Dave Johnston and Joe Franny Reichert and Jody Robinson Pettiford and Michelle Sims Armstrong, Paula Cordell, Linnea Demman, and likewise coaches Conrad Hardman, Newsom Foxes, Randolph Johnsons, and any others that I may have forgotten. I have taught your moms and your dads, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, your siblings. Some loved me and some hated me, but there was no middle ground. Machiavelli said not to be in the middle, and to be loved is good, but to be hated gives you more power. Forget about the power. I loved you all, whether you loved or hated me. You were a pleasure to teach because you are genuine, curious, and ambitious. My motto in my grade book was curiosity, ambition, and passion. I have graduates that represent that. They are actors, generals, writers, philosophers, entrepreneurs, teacher, and the list could go on. I have taught half of this town. I then addressed every class and congratulated the middle schoolers for putting up with this assembly, and got to the graduating seniors who were very glad to graduate with me. It was great to go out with them, but I didn't feel I was ready. It was like a wedding where the bride did not do the planning. I was saddened and hurt when the new administration offered the retirement packages. Personally, I felt verbally abused, addled by micromanagement, and saddened that listening was non-existent. But after some counseling, I made the difficult decision. So I did make the decision, as was indicated. In all businesses, these shifts in powers, buyouts, and changing leadership are commonplace. But Yellow Springs is not commonplace. So why here? Yellow Springs has heart. In the allegory of the Wizard of Oz, 2 of the 3 cohorts of Dorothy were seeking heart and courage. If it takes courage to bring about change from the status quo, the lion represents that political viewpoint. He actually was a very indecisive William Jennings Bryan. However, the Tin Man, who needed a heart, representing industry at Rockefeller and the workers that he worked for next to nothing, this leadership also is needing some type of heart, which Rockefeller was at that time lacking, but the people need it very badly. No mention has been made of the other cohort, the straw man. He was the one representing brains. However, I do feel that slotting conveniently teachers into subjects without considering skill or class size shows a disregard for knowledge and parallels an efficient business plan, but not an education system. This analogy update shows that Baum's book allegorically parallels the early populist progressive ideals, and it can be compared with today's issues. Remember, the problem then too was the economy, as the Yellow Brick Road and the Emerald City indicate. Another aspect is change really changed. It is a progressive favorite word. Clinton Obama loved it, as well as Morning in America for Reagan, and Are You Better Off 4 years than you were 4 years ago, also with Reagan. So it's a vacuous term. It's a term that it can be a cliche, It could be a catchphrase. But if real change is to take place, it has to be from a progressive point of view. That's with participation by students, teachers, parents, administrators, developing it rather from the bottom down up, rather than from the top down. Change that is swift likely will create as much havoc as a tornado, which indiscriminately rips up everything in its path without any respect for personal lives and memories. Only random oblivion remains for the shocked survivors to view. On the other hand, though, change can be positive, and Yellow Springs is noted for positive change. Whitehall Farm, Friends Care Center, Revival of Antioch, the barbershop protest, the integration of the Little Art 42, and the creation of this body, the exempted school district, which was to be different. As a history teacher, the past is prologue, as Faulkner said, but hopefully one learns from the experiences of others and passes knowledge to the next generation. But often this does not happen. To discard experience gleaned is, as Willie Loman says in Death of a Salesman, is to eat the orange and throw the peel away. How one treats its elders is important. It is a reflection of the culture. As I told my students, you talk to your grandma and your grandpa. I use oral history interview memory projects with the YSO news station to get them to do just that. One needs to know from whence one comes, or came. As your oldest employee, I would like to describe my perception when I did come to Yellow Springs in 1967. It was a small rural town, Forays, Eaton, Lutlers, and Brodies. The train ran through it as the traction had in my parents' time. It was a lazy small college town with 2 quaint shops and 2 bookstores. All of this has changed considerably, as you note, on the weekend. I taught at the police station, then John Bryan Junior High School, a building later rescued as a community project. When I was hired, I had one interview with the superintendent about a George Bernard Shaw play that Mary Dallas had produced at the amphitheater. I canceled my contract with another district and came to teach at that building. Hunting the cafeteria the first day was a big surprise. I thought that it was a cafeteria, but everyone had a brown bag, but I didn't. I learned quickly from my parents and students that the town was far from lazy. It was energetic and it asked a lot of questions. Activism prevailed. The concept of question authority was more than a bumper sticker. We integrated the text with supplemental Black history, women's history. We listened to anti and pro-war statements. We demonstrated we listened intently to the Mills Lawn and Antioch students who challenged us, and we wrote our own curriculum by ourselves. And in the evenings, we could folk dance, do community activities, go to the movies. The street fair was a big garage sale and a bake sale. The tie-dyes were all homemade, and the train ran regularly along the present bike path. The voice and issues remain, but the voices that I remember so strong are waning, and they're dying now, and new voices are now directing. To those in charge, my advice is to be clear. When my students attended village meetings, not just yours, but all of them, they thought some were too casual, that some were people were not interested, and that you all spoke in code. They said that about every one of the meetings. Be very clear to your constituents. Number 2, these are my farewell advice. Follow the cycles of history and recognize how the pendulum swings. My first principle said to me to lighten up. My last one said tighten up. Number 3, avoid sameness. Use the YS different drummer style. This is not Fairborn, Greenwich, Shawnee, or Cedarville. This is YS, and we are different. Number 4, base all decisions on first-hand observation and avoid scuttlebutt. Be aware that words have wounded many this year. Number 5, the superintendent and 1 clerk treasurer handled the numerous baby boomer era with very few resources and many, many students. It can be done. 6, the money saved by our departure should not be wasted in austere times when it's not frivolous. Tighten the belt. Knowledgeable teachers in small classes is the uniqueness, though, of YS and should be the ultimate, not the first cut. Number 7, I witnessed a shift in attitude, values, and management quite different from almost the last 5 decades in UIS, and I hope we go back to the more laid-back approach. Remember, my first principal had to tell me to lighten up, and it worked quite well for me. Finally, as Mark Twain says, practice honesty. Always do right. This will gratify some people and astonish the rest. With the students, I did point out to them also the Oscar Wilde quote that I have written in my plan book. It says, success is to love oneself, and this begins a lifelong relationship. This is what makes Yellow Springs unique. My teachers conveyed this to their students, but the teachers also need self-esteem to pass on to others that knowledge. They cannot be criticized or be treated as if they were pathetic. Educate is the giving of information, enlightening others. Effective teaching is achieved when the teacher and the students are happy. I always describe the joy of teaching as joy forever. The mix again is what makes YS unique and needs to be restored. Teachers and students need to be happy. Well, the fairy tale is the happy ending and life does not. Retirement is to be joyous. One's choice, not an I can't say it right now. Not being expedient. As I leave, though, I want to go out with a bang. I'll have Elliot, not a whimper. I said, don't be cruel, no brass knuckles, but I was hurt. And as Sue said to Nixon in his book, Margaret K. Mooney, You Must Go Now, one should go quickly. And I imagine I could go gracefully and without protest, but then I would regret that I never said what I wanted to say. But besides, I'm not Nixon. No one could generalize that this is a trend of the time nationwide or a crisis in education, and I could use that as my reason for going. Or one could say, oh, teachers never die, they just fade away and slip into oblivion, kind of like MacArthur. Or one could say, that's impossible to fight the system who's making the decisions for you. Get out while the getting's good. Or, I envy you, it's good to go. Or you could stringently say that this shift in values and management attitude so different from the past makes my exodus less painful because the environment is toxic. Or I could say, this is a very depressing times. My life has ended, and all the possessions and purposes that I have are being stripped from me because without school I have no life. I am parallel to this dying woman in Zorba the Greek. Or I could say that this is a fantastic unplanned moment in my life, other than hitchhiking adventures, the first time I did something unplanned, and new experiences will be so intriguing I can travel the world. And or I could say I'm unemployed and seeking work as an adjunct professor, or I could write the book, or I could make out of complexity, simplicity. I'm quoting Einstein there because I could clean my house, or I could just say ciao. Just ciao.